Okay. And we are live. GM, welcome everyone to Edtalk Hall 2. My name is Mike Peck, co-founder of Web3 DAO, and today I'm honored, privileged to welcome our two guests on to discuss Web3 communities. We have, sorry about that. Okay, there we go. Once I close the mic, we're good. Again, I am honored and privileged to welcome our special guests on today for this conversation on Web3 community building. I have Contessa with us as well as Riley. And so welcome. And I'd love for you both to take a moment to introduce yourself. Contessa, if you want to kick us off.
Absolutely. GM for wherever you are in this beautiful world. My name is Contessa Louise Cooper, and I am one of the co-founders of Black Creator DAO. You will see my little buddy here because he just loves to be on camera. I call him one of our unofficial co-founders of Black Creators DAO, and he is here to make sure that everybody is having a really good time. It is extremely important, and one of the things that I talk about is to make sure that as we are kind of building out these new places in Web3, that we are being very diverse and inclusive in our communities. Riley?
Hi, my name is Riley, also known as Riley Beans in the Web3 space. I am honored to be here with all of you, and it is so important to bring these diverse communities into Web3 because, as we all know, representation matters. And also, your voice matters. In Web3, you get the unique opportunity to use your voice to create and build change throughout the world. So when we are talking about diverse communities, we also talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity. But the way I build communities specifically is bringing in these two other words called belonging and accessibility. So bringing in belonging into these communities means bringing people into the conversation in really intentional ways to create opportunities for others. Bringing people into the conversation means making sure that people are aware of their surroundings and the other people around them, right? Taking care of your neighbor. And let's talk about accessibility. Contessa?
I love the ideal of accessibility. I talk about some of the challenges that I have. I am a person who has a chronic illness. I'm also a person who is neurodivergent. And before entering into the Web3 space, I often felt othered. I often felt that I wasn't included in conversations. And so being included in conversations and letting other people know that you're allowed to show up in this space exactly the way that you are, and that your voice matters, and that you are important, that you are not broken, and that you have worth. Those things are important to me, and especially as we are building these communities.
So I had a question. I would love to both of you to expand upon this, and just drawing back to like the education scene. One of the keys that, and a lot of conversations that I think are occurring in education are about how do we bring out, or how do we create space to have these types of conversations where people can feel that sense of belonging. I love that idea of taking care of your neighbor. Something that oftentimes in schools, we have so many different things that we have to attend to that oftentimes that gets lost in favor of like test scores or things like that. How is it that you both have created space for these types of conversations in your community? I'd love to hear some of the ways that you're doing that.
Yeah, well, I have built a few communities in the Web3 space, namely around, the idea of NFTs. And so, there's a lot of education that goes into these programs and these communities. And that means that you really need to cater to all different types of learnings. And that includes both written and visual and including those accessibility options as well. So when I am building a educational session or a community building event, that means that I am typically building in Discord or on Twitter, which means that you need to build out sessions that allow for people to see themselves and how they learn, right? Because I am someone who has dyslexia and I am a visual learner. So I also make sure that my community members see that in themselves and that they are catered to in that way, right? And making sure that these concepts that we're discussing are broken down in ways that everyone can understand them, not just the people who have been here for years, right? You know, when we are having a discussion specifically in Discord that doesn't allow for transcription, typically I will record the session on Loom, which does have a transcription setting option. That way, when people go and view those later, they have those tools available to them. And I also make sure that there are different fonts available and alternate fonts for people who are using screen readers, right?
That's awesome. Yeah, I think, and big fan of Loom. We use it often in education. It's a product that we're super familiar with, and I think I really love the way that you're thinking about, you know, we talk about voice and choice in education quite often. You know, how is it that we can provide agency for the individuals to kind of select how they want to present their understanding and their knowledge. And so what you're doing is you're creating these different pathways for people to engage based upon their readiness, their interest level. We consider that like differentiation in education. So that's wonderful. Contessa, would you have anything to add to that?
Web3 moves really, really quickly. And we find that a lot of times that not everybody processes information that quickly. I know that sometimes I have an issue with really fast-paced conversations that I feel like I want to slow things down. And so we give people the opportunity to let us know whether or not we're moving too fast, whether or not we're moving too slow, if they need more time to think about things. Providing things like agenda and letting people know what we're going to talk about beforehand gives that time to process information and be able to speak on things without kind of things being thrown at them at the last minute and trying to have that anxiety and things like that come up. Another thing that's really important to me is to be vulnerable and to show up in that vulnerability. I don't always get things right. I stumble over my words. I misspell things, and letting people know that those things are okay and it doesn't take away from their knowledge or them being professional in that space, in this space, I think is really important.
Yeah, you're so true. Web3 moves so fast. And there's a question that I think that sort of leads me to, and that is like, how do you take the temperature of your community? How do you, you know, what sort of ways do you assess where the community's at? And then from there, how do you act based on those assessments? Like, are you using specific tools? Is it just certain exercises or certain characteristics of you that you feel that you kind of lean into to help understand what your community needs? Because I think that's really a big question for all educators in their classrooms or their schools and all Web3 builders. Like, knowing your community is critical. So what kind of tools or skills do you really lean on to try and, you know, get the temperature, assess where people are at, and then figure out where to go from there?
For me, I am part of so many different communities. So a lot of what I do is listen. I observe a lot. So even when I'm not in my community at the time, I'm in other communities just observing how people are interacting with each other, because we do share a lot of different communities. And so someone may be interacting with a community in one way, and then, 30 minutes later, they may interact with another community in a totally different way. So learning these patterns and observing how people are thinking and feeling in other communities, I can bring those learnings into my community. And so that helps everyone.
I think it's really important, like Riley said, to be really involved in communities. I'm in a lot of Twitter spaces, and I personally know probably about 95% of all the members in my community. We have one-on-one conversations. I may DM them, ask them how they're doing. If someone who's showing up for everything and all of a sudden they're missing, I will personally step in and ask them how they're doing, what's going on in their lives. I am always reaching out to see what is going on in my community and in general in the Web3 community. I think it's really important to be there for each other, so that they know that there are safe spaces, so they know there are places where they can talk and communicate, be seen, and be heard.
That's awesome. So you both really highlighted a couple of key characteristics and skills. Listening, is just so important. And Riley, I 100% agree with you. I'm across so many Discord channels. It's very overwhelming. But at the same time, though, it's very helpful to learn from others, see what others are doing, take what they're doing, and use the best of practices that I can find to bring it to my community. And Contessa, you're absolutely on point too. And that is you have to be in touch with people. It's about the people, being authentic, being real, being you is so important. But you have to be empathetic. You have to be a listener. You have to be thinking about and concerned with your community. And that leads me to my next question is, are there any specific, skills besides listening and empathy that you would kind of tack on to things that are really important for Web3 community builders beyond those two things?
Those are my biggest ones. There are tons of soft skills, right?
Sure.
Being a problem solver, of course, is important. Really knowing about what's going on in the space. Things that people may be worried or concerned about that are impacting how they show up in the space, things that are going on in the world around us impact how people show up in the space and how we communicate with each other. If there's a natural disaster or something that's impacting your community, those type of feelings are going to show up in your community, and knowing those things are important.
For me, I think, some communities are really focused on one specific thing, but as a community builder, it's important for me to know what's going on throughout the entire space, so that when someone has a question or when someone needs some help with something, then I can be there to lend a helping hand, right? And being that authentic voice to say, hey, I might not know the answer now, but give me just 2 minutes and I'll be able to figure it out for you.
So I've been able to put you guys on the spot with that question. So appreciate you kind of rolling with it. But I think what I just heard there, and the part that so Riley and I were discussing before we got started, was that there are so many people in this world who are educators who aren't in a classroom. And the skills that you just both gave us are key skills that are important for just being a great human being, but also really important for our educators in our classrooms. They're all building communities there. And I think these skills, what you just highlighted, are just so critical for educators anywhere, whether it's in the classroom or not, to be in touch with. So thanks for rolling with that question. I know it was a tough off the cuff question. One of the questions that I had, and I would hope that you guys both have some insights on, and that is platforms. Platforms are one of the biggest challenges that we have conversations regularly within our community about. Most of our community is built in Discord, and we have sort of communication channels outside, and especially in Twitter. But outside of that, we don't have a lot of footprint in different platforms, but we're always thinking about, is there something better than Discord? And so I'd love to hear both of your opinions on platforms, like how you use different platforms to engage different people who have different interests or needs within your community. So I'd love to hear how you guys are using the platforms you use, and in what ways, do they help benefit or take away from your community?
Yeah, go ahead.
So when we first started Black Creator DAO, the platform that we used was really important. I've heard a lot of conversations about Discord and how many people who are not in Web3 just really do not like Discord. They don't think it's very personable. It can be a very big space. They get kind of lost in conversations and things like that. And so we wanted to use something that kind of represented some of the Web 2 world that they're from and slowly ease them into Web 3. And so we decided to use Geneva for our community. There's still a learning curve. Any new platform, there's a learning curve, but it's really similar to how people interact on some of the Web 2 platforms. And people seem to, when they come into the community, really kind of understand where they're supposed to be and be able to jump into conversations like that. I think that when we think about platforms, we forget about platforms like emails and forums and, kind of these Google groups and things like that, which are also platforms that you can use in order to engage your community outside of your larger community. So creating smaller, more intimate groups where people can talk and maybe feel more comfortable outside of the larger group. Because sometimes in larger groups, the louder voices are the ones that are heard. And so when we create these smaller, more intimate groups, then more voices can be heard and more people can show up.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that because, in my time as a community builder in Web3, I've seen these different sort of Web3 native platforms, and they are growing. And I will say that the platform that feels the best to me is Geneva, because of, when you go from using Discord consistently and sort of introduce yourself to Geneva, it is such a different experience, and the colors, how a platform makes you feel changes how you feel about the community that you're going into. I believe, at least, the buttons that you click from the onboarding process to how your community is designed, right? In Discord, you can design your community in such unique ways, but it depends on the language that the platform uses, how inviting they are, how they make you feel, the rounded edges. All these things make a difference in your experience. And it also comes down to meeting people where they are. We talk about that all the time. Like, when you're in school, right? You want to meet people and bring people into the conversation where they feel most comfortable. So if someone doesn't want to be in a big chat room, which is basically what these platforms are, maybe they only get their information from you from Twitter or email or Instagram, right? Whatever makes them feel connected to you is what matters.
And you mentioned earlier that people show up differently on different platforms. And I find that that's true too. I actually show up differently on Twitter than I do on Facebook. Don't tell anybody I'm on Facebook, than I do on Instagram or, within my own community. They all know kind of different parts of Contessa. But when you come into my community, you kind of get all of me because I'm comfortable enough in my community that I can show up completely and wholly, where I feel like I can't in some of these other spaces and some of these other platforms where I may not be as protected as I am in my own individual community.
I really like that example to kind of conclude that like question with. I think it's really important to understand that today who we are is a reflection. It's always been a reflection of our experiences and how we want others to see ourselves in the world. And before the internet and all this stuff, that was very one-dimensional. It was your real life persona. That was it, pretty much. But now, with all these new technologies, we're able to kind of present, all the different aspects of our lives in different ways and in different places and at different times, which makes the idea of being cognizant of why people want to engage with us, when they want to engage with us, and on what terms do they want to engage with us is really important when building that community. So you both have been wonderful at explaining how you're opening doors and creating more access for your communities that you're in and for people to engage from wherever they're coming from and for whatever it is they need, which I really do appreciate. It's great to kind of hear that perspective, especially from community builders like yourselves. So thanks for sharing that insight. So I had another question that I wanted to pose to both of you. And maybe this will be the last question before we have some final words. And this question, I think, and coming back to, I think, Contessa, you were saying that, Web3 moves so fast before. So with things moving so quickly, and at 24 hours, 7 days a week, I think it's really important to understand, like, our individual capabilities, our own bandwidth, to be able to do all this work. Our communities can only really be as healthy as we are. If we're stretched so thin that we can't be there to listen, fully and understand the needs fully of our community, that can become very problematic. So my question to you both is, how do you make sure that you both are feeling healthy and recharged and there and present when you can be for your communities? Like, how do you find the time to balance it all?
Self-care is very important to me, and it's something that I've added into my calendar. There is no way that I can do what I do without rest, without relaxation, without my daily routines, without taking moments for me. On the days where I feel overwhelmed or feel like I cannot show up as the best version of myself, that's where I'm glad that I can lean on my team and my community. And I'm not afraid to vocalize, hey, I'm not having a great mental health day today. I would appreciate prayers, good vibes, send some energy my way, letting you know that I may not show up as the best version of myself today, and I need a break. Those things are important. We talk a lot about mental health. We talk a lot about putting yourselves first. We talk a lot about tending to your needs before you can tend to the needs of others. We talk about how important it is to have a support system and to create those things and what that looks like for you. And your support system does not have to look like my support system. Your method of self-care does not have to look like my method of self-care. And if you need help with creating those things, that we are available to help you with that. If you need resources, we always have resources where you can call and talk to someone. If we notice that a member is in need of help, that we will reach out and offer help for them. These are the things that we feel is really important in our community, right?
Yeah, I really do agree with that assessment, because one thing that I heard recently from a fellow community builder named Piper Wilson is that self-care is community care. And when I'm taking care of myself, then I can take care of my communities, right? And so when I notice myself hitting that mental limit, then I know it's time to stop. Like right then. And I feel, at, Friday, 5 p.m., 6 p.m., I know I'm done, right? Because I think community builders as a whole put a lot on their plate to and just because that's who we are, sort of. And so it's important to know where your limits are and to know when it's time to rest. And so it's self-awareness is really important in this line of work, that if you're struggling with that, take time to reflect and take time to look inward and say, where are my limits and what do I need to do to take care of myself today, and how do I prepare myself for tomorrow?
Boundaries are so important. There are so many of us who had to learn the hard way about community boundaries, and that you can't let someone, be in your inbox all the time, to create your own office hours per se, and how you allow your community to interact with you. You can't interact with me the same way my daughter does. It's just that's a hard line boundary for me. She has access to me 24/7, whereas my community does not, because downtime is extremely important for me, so I can refresh and be there for my community.
I love that. It's, we talked about, for the first kind of 20 minutes of this, about creating space for others. It's equally as important that we create space for ourselves, to grow, reflect, to recharge, because if you don't, the space will, really stretch you out to a point where you break. And so I think it's a really good thing to sort of juxtapose against, like, the community side of it too, is that we need to make sure that we're healthy as well. Because if you let it, the space will, continue to eat up more and more of your time until there's none left. So thanks for sharing your insights there. I'd love to close our session today in the last couple of minutes here with just some, words of wisdom from Web3 builders. And again, to our educators who are listening in, like, these are important skills that you can take with and transfer back to your classrooms or your buildings. And so, I think we can learn a lot from what we've already heard. But is there anything else you both would like to share about your experiences in building that you think would be great for our audience?
One thing that I will say is that there's so many spaces in Web3, so many different types of communities in Web3. And if you ever find yourself in a community where you're not being seen, you're not being heard, and you're not feeling comfortable, know that you can very easily come out of that space and find another space that is better for you. Just because some place works better for other people does not mean that it's a space for you. So go out and find your space, your community, your people here in Web3.
Yeah, thank you for that, Contessa. I think Web3 allows us to create and build and be a part of these unique circles that create authenticity and allow us to really be ourselves, right? I think as the internet has grown, we have grown into ourselves, and we are now building digital ownership capabilities that allow us to be our full and authentic selves on the internet, and how we are going to move into the future with that in mind. So thank you. Your voice matters, and keep going.
That's wonderful. I love it. It's a great place to close for today. Riley, Contessa, thank you both so much for your time and your insights on this. I think for me, one of the big takeaways is that ultimately it's about people. Like, the space is about people and about finding who you are, and who you are is valued no matter where you go. And so you just have to find that right people, that right group of people to join. And so again, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for your time today and for rolling with it. So I appreciate all the insights and wisdom that you shared with our community today. And again, thank you both for your time.